You can shape your life. There's this video with Steve Jobs. He says this in it, quote, "When you grow up, you tend to get told what the world is and the way it is, and your life is just to live your life inside the world. Try not to bash into the walls too much. Try to have a nice family life, have fun, save a little bit of money. But life, that's a very limited life. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact, and that is everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you, and you can change it, you can influence it, you can build your own things that other people can use. The most important thing is to shake off this erroneous notion that life is there and you're just gonna live in it versus embrace it, change it, improve it, make your mark upon it. I think that's very important, and however you learn that, once you learn it, you'll want to change life and make it better, because it's kind of messed up in a lot of ways. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again." End quote. It's a short and simple video, and like most of the best advice we ever get, it's simple, it's obvious, it's nothing we don't already really know, unless we stubbornly feel like preventing ourselves from knowing it. And yet, when someone like Jobs says it so simply and matter-of-factly, it resonates if we are open to his frequency. We can shape life, we can empower ourselves to cultivate the life of our dreams. We can bend reality and make huge positive changes, not only for our own world, but for the lives of people dancing in our influence. Painfully obvious advice right up there with tying your shoes or making sure you get enough sleep. It's utterly simplistic, but let's not pretend like it doesn't also contain the most complicated of qualities we will ever likely face. Jobs essentially saying, don't sabotage yourself by playing pretend that you are a victim of circumstances. But the truth is, by the time most of us realize the reality of what he's saying, we are indeed at that point, to some degree, greater or lesser, absolutely a victim of circumstance. If for no other reason than that is what we are pretending ourselves to be. Backed by the prison walls of human psychology, probably a negative addiction or 10, and a state of mind encouraged by society that will guarantee to hobble us into barely ever breathing the same atmosphere as our potential, let alone living up to it. It adds insult to injury, really, that the advice is that obvious. It's literally, you can affect your life, and yet so unreachable to so many of us, to so many who won't ever guarantee or graduate to the level of considering it, or who turn it into new age concepts and call it things like the secret and make it part of magical thinking, calling it the law of attraction and such. I mean, there is aspects of the law of attraction that, our states of mind matter. I'm not saying they don't, but really the only thing we can attract is the ability to take massive action. That's very important too, that gets overlooked in a lot of those things. By overcoming the hurdles of every psychological stumbling block interfering with our ability to poke our lives and change their structures, let's make a list of what gets in our way, of what prevents us from tying our soul's shoes, so to speak, or breathing the air of our potential even just a little bit. Number one is a victim mentality. Life has happened to us. We have a story of abuse. We have stories of addiction. God forbid we were raised in Generation X like me, where we were told being a junkie was cool. That's a lot to overcome. The graveyards are full of people who never saw the other side of that lie. There, but for the grace of God, go I. Victim mentality gets leaked into society through grunge music philosophy, as well as identity politics and psychological narratives, which all imply a kind of helplessness that society ensures we will be supported in applying to our lives. So why do the hard things of restructuring and risking our worlds when we can simply take on mentalities handed to us on silver platters from the idiot box of the media directly to our souls, which become fragmented? If you haven't noticed, society isn't trying to create endless Steve Jobs or even a few extra people who understand that they can shape the reality of their own world as well as the lives of others. Society wants beggars, not leaders. At least that's what the people motivated by fear and desire to control really want, which also seems to be the people who get voted into leadership positions. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. When people are subjugated and controlled, the illusion of power is fed like some insatiable demonic hunger from forces beyond this world. Number 2, it's difficult. Yes, it's simple. Yes, it's obvious. And yes, it's by far the most fun we can have, which isn't really dependent on externalized versions of success, but it is difficult to change ourselves into the types that can change the world. There's just so many different preventative measures, both within ourselves and externalized forces working against us. But there are also as many opportunities if you are charged by waking up early and putting pen to paper, regardless of what the world says about you, then you are amongst the luckiest souls alive. And if we motivate on that level for a long enough timeline without needing results, externalized variables of success will indeed present themselves at some point. But by the time they do, we will already know the freedom they promise from on high. The creative waves we've been riding in a dream's pursuit already put us there. The price in terms of money for the real benefit of everything Jobs' best advice gave is nothing. Is open to all for the price of some early mornings, consistency, and motivation. That's it. That turns our lives from hellscapes into dreamlike and wondrous, into literally being as rich in the qualities that matter as a Steve Jobs was. There is no price to entry other than hard work and dedication, and hours upon hours in front of the infinite mirror wall of human psychology. But lives built on foundations of dramas in and amongst people of the lie who are by demonic instinct out to sabotage anyone attempting to overcome these booby-trapped dimensions must be sidestepped and overcome often on our journey. Imagine the guy who basically invented the personal computer, who shaped society more than just about any other, is remembered for this advice. You can shape your life. You can affect what happens in your world. It's mind-bogglingly obvious, even practically idiotic, and yet out of the reach for the overwhelming majority. It's the mere wall of reality, constantly changing shape and size, confusing and shifting. But that's the game, to keep going within the grasp of a shifting perspective. Number 3 way we prevent ourselves from living up to this advice is unrealistic expectations. We believe we should be rewarded for extraordinary efforts within months, or even sooner weeks, even days of applying real effort. We get met with the world's indifference or even admonishment or some online negativity, and that's enough to send us back into the killing fields of a victim mentality or the strong winds of addiction. In order to push past these walls, we must not care about what people think and say. We must be immune to social shame. We must respect our dreams over the opinions of others. And we probably need to be connected to God in a robust prayer life in order to make this happen. Asking God for help often is big for me personally. I couldn't do it without that. It's both a lot and practically nothing at the same time. Changing our world. Because the actions are simple, but the perseverance and dedication and sustained consistent desire are difficult. For many of us, that list is simple and a matter of course, but for many others, the majority of others, that list is practically an impossible hurdle. So strapped to the likes of social media that all their efforts are measured there and compared with the most blatantly successful people in the world into inaction. All the booby-trapped effectively to keep us inactive and strapped to the ball and chain of misunderstanding the most basic premise of reality in relation to dreams. Earl Nightingale, that old-timey motivational speaker with a nicotine-stained voice giving us advice on YouTube's black and white channels, puts it matter-of-factly. He describes an attitude and life of success and then says the kicker like he's saying nothing at all, because back then he was saying nothing at all. He describes the lifestyle, then he simply says, all we have to do is do this for 5 or so years, and we will no doubt be amongst the most successful people in the world. Or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but the point I'm making is he says 5 years. Imagine pursuing a goal hard for 5 years and not having any expectations for any external variables of success, or even looking for any results for 5 whole years. We all would be multi-gazillionaires if we employed this strategy. Most of us start looking for results after 5 minutes, even after 5 seconds. We decide we want success, and then we check social media to see if we got some extra likes just from our states of mind alone changing. Social media has neutered us completely in many ways. Imagine giving yourself 5 years without any external feedback as determining any aspect of your dream. Imagine you're on a momentum train for 5 years of daily activity that has no stakes in the response of the outside world at all for 5 whole years. That's the world Steve Jobs grew up in. We had no external measures of success breathing down our throats back then. A couple of parents maybe, a sibling or two, a no good friend, maybe a good one if we were lucky, and that's it. Even if those were the crappy versions of the possible people in our lives. In other words, even if our people was littered with crappy people, it wasn't too difficult for a dream to overwhelm them. It was easy to believe in ourselves over the reflection of the world back then. There was hardly any reflection at all. A semi-charged dream was enough. It was powerful to set us off into years of motion where Earl Nightingale's 5-year theory was actually a shortened version of a timeline built to motivate action. The real timeline is 10 years probably, but these days people get motivated. A week or so later, start posting evidence of a dream's inception, get little to no feedback, and that's all she wrote. There she goes, sayonara, back to inaction, back to the security blanket of a victim mentality, back to repeating society's ready-made excuses and jumping into their constantly improved upon addictions. Oh no, more addictions. 5 freaking years. Imagine 5 years of zero feedback being expected. Being shocked, in fact, if one positive reflection came back before 5 years passed. That's the mentality we need. That's the mentality we used to have. Minimum. The minimum mentality, the 5-year mindset. We could literally move mountains with it these days on this field, the field of today. That mentality would make us unstoppable forces, but we need a strong, independent mind in order to achieve that these days, an inner calling and a dedication to God's vision for our potential. There's another thing, having a purpose. Just as our society is taught to be soft in terms of timelines, it's also taught to be hard in terms of generosity of spirit. If we apply the 5-year mentality and marry it to having a purpose, and the purpose being to help others, we simply become an unstoppable, world-altering force of nature. There you go, Steve. Where are you at? Imagine having a mentality where we give ourselves 5 years to achieve any feedback whatsoever with the spirit of helping mankind achieve love, success, and freedom. It's a basic recipe for massive success, which excludes nobody. Most of us have a spare 5 years left, at least if we're honest, where we, God willing, where we had no real plans outside of overeating, getting drunk, watching porn, and talking about how difficult everything is. Anyway, I'm kind of kidding, but only kind of. We can put ourselves into a mental framework of just a couple of decades ago and thrive under the current structures of our times. And we can do that with relative ease. Imagine if success had a time machine. The world's gone soft on us, ladies and gentlemen. They've all bitten the wrong apple, and it's more than most can chew. I am the walrus, cuckoo, cuckoo. The Beatles' entire book was written in just over 5 years. From I Wanna Hold Your Hand to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, a lot can happen in a relatively short amount of time with enough focus and dedication. 5 years without a feedback barometer from society having any effect whatsoever on the pursuit of our vision means success becomes a choice we can simply make. Hallelujah! We eliminate much of the noise. We decide and we move towards it. Success to some degree would be practically guaranteed. The only variable will be how giant and how supernatural that success actually turns out to be. Steve Jobs knew we have the power to change the world, starting with our own. Thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and tell me what you think about this 5-year theory and if we apply it to today and how we can change our world and help others do the same.